My name is Elena Whitmore, and for most of my adult life, I believed that love was supposed to feel steady. Not exciting, not chaotic, just reliable. I believed that if something felt calm, it meant it was safe. And if it felt safe, it meant it was real. That belief is what ruined me. I was 30 years old when the word entered my life. A single word. Short. Ordinary. The kind of word people throw around without thinking twice. He didn't shout it. He didn't spit it out in anger. He didn't even sound cruel. He laughed. And that's how I knew much later that it had already been over long before I realized it. I met Nathan Caldwell on a dating app. The boring way. The modern way. The way people don't like to admit because it feels unromantic and transactional. But our first conversation didn't feel like that at all. It lasted almost 3 hours. Not flirting. Not posturing. Not trying to impress each other. Just talking. About work. About travel. About how exhausting it was to pretend ambition looked the same for everyone. About how some people wanted corner offices and others just wanted peace. Nathan told me he worked in corporate event strategy. Big brands. Big clients. Big money. He talked about venues the way architects talk about buildings. About lighting, flow, presence. I told him I worked in software systems design. Back-end infrastructure. Quiet projects. Invisible wins. Systems that only got noticed when they failed. You build the bones, he said. I dress the skin. I laughed. At the time, it sounded like balance. Within weeks, texting turned into nightly phone calls. Calls turned into weekends together. And weekends slowly became routines. Friday dinners. Saturday mornings at the same coffee place. Sunday grocery runs that felt domestic without being forced. I thought routines meant commitment. I thought they meant I was chosen. Nathan lived in a world of appearances. His work required it. Rooms full of people who wore confidence like armor. Men who shook hands too hard. Women who smiled without warmth. I didn't live in that world. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to be seen. I liked stability. Predictability. A life that didn't require performance. He said he liked that about me. You're grounding, he told me once, his hand resting on my knee as we sat at a bar full of people pretending not to look at each other. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room. I held on to that sentence like proof. For the first 4 months, he made me feel chosen. Then Clara started appearing. At first, it was subtle. Clara used to love this place, he said once, glancing around a restaurant we were trying for the first time. Clara would have laughed at that, he said during a story I told. Clara knew the owner, he added casually at a rooftop bar. I told myself it was normal. People talked about their pasts. That didn't mean they wanted to return to them. But history doesn't usually compare. By the 5th month, the comparisons stopped being accidental. Clara dressed better for events. Clara understood the industry. Clara had presence. She just gets it, Nathan said one night while scrolling through his phone. Some people do. I pretended not to notice the photos. I started noticing other things instead. How he corrected my phrasing in front of his friends. How he suggested outfits for me that didn't feel like mine. How he went quiet when I talked too long about my work. Small things. Sharp things. Things I told myself didn't matter. The night it happened, we were standing in front of my closet. I had a work function. Nothing glamorous. Just an internal leadership mixer. I was deciding between a navy dress and a soft gray one. Which one? I asked. Nathan tilted his head, thinking. Then he smiled. You know, he said casually, you're kind of basic. He laughed immediately after. Like it was affectionate. Like it was harmless. Like it wasn't something that would crawl into my head and live there. I laughed too. That was my first mistake. After that, the word kept coming back. Basic taste. Basic expectations. Basic comfort. He never said it angrily. That was the part that confused me. He said it like feedback. Like an observation. Like something I should improve. And without realizing it, I started shrinking. I stopped suggesting places I liked. I stopped wearing clothes that felt too safe. I stopped talking about long-term plans unless they aligned with his world. I told myself this was compromise. What no one tells you is that compromise feels a lot like erasure when it only moves in one direction. The breakup didn't come with screaming or tears. It came on a Tuesday. We were supposed to have lunch. He canceled an hour before. Something came up. I didn't question it. At exactly 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. "We need to talk about us." My chest tightened instantly, like my body had been waiting for it even if my mind hadn't. I called him. "I don't think we should talk on the phone," he said calmly. "Can we meet later?" Later never came. Instead, he called that night. He said he ran into Clara. They had coffee. Nothing weird. Except everything changed. "I think I've been settling," he said. Settling. The word hit harder than basic ever did. I want someone who matches my lifestyle, my ambition. I already knew how it would end. 20 minutes after he hung up, the text arrived. "You're too basic for the life I want." No anger. No drama. Just final. I stared at the screen until the words stopped looking real. Then I typed 2 words. "Good to know." And I went quiet. The quiet after a breakup is strange when you're not devastated. No crying on the bathroom floor. No wine-fueled texts. No dramatic unfollowing spree. I still woke up at the same time. Still went to the gym. Still sat in meetings and solved problems and nodded when expected. But something underneath had shifted. It wasn't heartbreak. It was humiliation. Being left hurts. Being told you weren't enough stays. For 3 days, I didn't reach out. I didn't block him either. I let the silence sit exactly as it was, uncomfortable, unanswered, unresolved. On the 3rd night, I did something I hadn't planned to do. I texted his older sister. Her name was Megan Caldwell. We'd met a handful of times. Family dinners, birthdays, polite conversations where she always seemed to be watching more than she spoke. I typed the message, deleted it, typed it again. "Hey Megan, it's Elena. Nathan and I broke up. Just wanted to give you a heads up in case he mentions it." She replied within 5 minutes. What happened? I stared at that question longer than I should have. He said I wasn't aligned with the life he wants. His ex helped him realize it. There was a pause. Then her reply came through. "Oh God. Clara again." My fingers went cold. "You knew?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Elena, I'm really sorry. You deserve better than that. People don't apologize like that unless there's more." "How long has she been back?" I asked. Another pause. "Officially? Recently. Unofficially? She never really left." I sat down on the edge of my bed as the truth settled in. Megan told me everything. The late-night texts. The accidental run-ins at events. The way Clara always stayed close enough to matter. "She keeps men comparing," Megan said. "Not enough to commit. Just enough to stay relevant." Compare. The word twisted something deep in my stomach. When the conversation ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. And for the first time since the breakup, I stopped wondering what I lacked. Because it was never about me. The next morning, I met Rachel Monroe for coffee. She took one look at my face and said, "You look calm," which usually means something big happened. "Recently single," I said. She winced. "Oh, what happened?" I gave her the short version. She didn't hesitate. "Clara Adler?" she asked. I blinked. "You know her?" Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice. "Unfortunately. And if Nathan left you for her, I'm sorry, but you dodged something." She pulled out her phone, and that's when I saw the photo. Clara, on a yacht, wrapped around a man who wasn't Nathan. The caption read, "Living the dream." Something didn't explode inside me. It settled. An idea didn't arrive loud. It arrived quietly. I looked up at Rachel. "Do you ever go to Arden Street Cafe?" I asked. She smiled slowly. "Oh," she said. "This is about to get interesting, isn't it?" I smiled back. "Yes," I said. "It really is." And that was the moment I stopped being the woman who got left and started becoming the woman who was about to be remembered. Arden Street Cafe didn't smell like coffee. It smelled like intention. That was the first thing I noticed when I pushed the glass door open that Saturday afternoon. The air inside wasn't warm or inviting. It was curated. Polished concrete floors. Exposed bricks softened by amber lighting. Matte black fixtures that reflected just enough to suggest taste without ever looking cheap. People didn't come here to drink espresso. They came here to be seen holding it. Nathan used to call places like this neutral ground. What he really meant was safe territory. A room where people could measure each other quietly. Where status could be assessed without conversation. Where clothing, posture, and confidence spoke before anyone opened their mouth. It was his favorite place in the city. And Clara's. Rachel and I arrived early on purpose. Not rushed. Not tentative. Early enough to choose our seats. The window table. The corner one Nathan always insisted on because, according to him, the light hits right. The same table Clara loved because it framed her perfectly in photos. The one I could have found blindfolded. I slid into the chair slowly, deliberately, like it belonged to me now. Rachel watched me as we ordered drinks. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I'm listening," I said. To the room. To myself. To the part of me that had spent months apologizing without realizing it. We leaned toward each other naturally. Not staged. Not exaggerated. Close enough to look intentional, without crossing a line. Rachel laughed easily, her hand brushing my arm once as she finished a story about a client meltdown she'd survived the week before. She had that kind of presence, the kind that didn't beg for attention but commanded it anyway. At exactly 2:07 p.m., the door opened again. Clara walked in. She was laughing loudly, already mid-story, flanked by two women dressed like extensions of her personality. I recognized her instantly, even though we'd never officially been introduced. Nathan had described her enough times. Polished. Controlled. Effortless in a way that required constant maintenance. She didn't see me at first. I watched the moment she did. Her eyes swept the room casually. Landed on the window. Narrowed just slightly when they found my face. Widened for half a second, just long enough to betray surprise. Then she saw Rachel. Saw Rachel's posture angled toward me. Saw Rachel's hand still resting near mine. Saw me smiling openly, freely, without checking myself. Her expression flickered. Surprise. Confusion. Something like irritation. Then neutrality snapped into place like armor. She whispered something to her friends. All three of them looked over. I lifted my hand in a small wave. Polite. Controlled. Unbothered. She didn't wave back. Instead, she walked toward our table. "Elena," she said, my name sounding like something she needed to test out loud. "Clara," I replied evenly. She glanced at Rachel. "Hi." Rachel smiled politely. "Hi." There was a pause. "How do you two know each other?" Clara asked, her eyes flicking between us. "We work in overlapping fields," Rachel said smoothly. "We grab coffee sometimes." Sometimes. Clara's gaze returned to me. "You moved on quickly," she said. I didn't flinch. "I didn't move on," I replied. "I went out for coffee." Her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. I looked at Rachel. Rachel gave a small nod. "I'll be right here." Outside, the air felt sharper. Cleaner. Like the city itself was paying attention. "So," Clara said, crossing her arms, "is this a thing now?" "No," I said calmly. "It's coffee." That didn't look like coffee. "You broke up with him," I reminded her. "Why does it matter what it looks like?" She hesitated. "I didn't think you'd bounce back this fast," she admitted. I studied her face. The carefully applied makeup, the controlled vulnerability, the way her eyes searched mine for reassurance she wasn't entitled to. "Clara," I said quietly, "you told me I wasn't enough. That I was too basic for your life. You don't get to be surprised when I continue living mine." Her eyes shimmered. "This feels cruel," she said. I almost laughed. "Cruel would be telling you that the man you left me for is currently posting yacht photos with another woman," I said evenly. "But I'm not doing that." Her face drained of color. "What?" she whispered. I shrugged. "Check his Instagram. Or don't. Either way, It's not my concern anymore. I turned and walked back inside. Rachel raised an eyebrow when I sat down. Everything okay? Perfect, I said. Through the window, I watched Clara pull out her phone. Scroll. Freeze. Her friends leaned in. One of them put an arm around her. They left without ordering. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted better than I remembered. That night, my phone rang. I let it ring. 10 minutes later, it rang again. I knew it was her without checking. Some instincts don't need confirmation. The third call came an hour later. I was folding laundry when I finally answered. Elena, Clara said, breathless. We need to talk. About what? I asked, already knowing. About yesterday. About Nathan. About everything. There was a pause. I could hear her swallowing back tears. I made a mistake, she said. I see that now. I closed my eyes. Nathan was just a fantasy, she continued. Something I kept alive in my head. Being with you was real. It was good. I threw it away. You did, I said quietly. Can we try again? She asked. Please. The word please used to work on me. It didn't anymore. You didn't just hurt me, I said. You measured me, compared me, made me feel like a placeholder until something shinier came along. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said. But I deserve someone who doesn't need to lose me to realize my value. She started crying. So that's it? She asked. You're just done? You were done first, I replied. I'm just catching up. She called again after we hung up. I didn't answer. 6 weeks passed. Through Megan, I heard that Clara and Nathan tried to make things work. It lasted 2 weeks before he disappeared again, apparently chasing the same yacht girl Rachel had warned me about. I wasn't surprised. Rachel and I stayed friends. The cafe thing was petty, and we both knew it. But sometimes clarity comes with a side of drama. I ran into Clara at a work event 2 weeks later. She avoided eye contact. I didn't. I smiled politely, returned to my conversation, and lived my life. Later, I saw her watching me, laughing, existing whole. She texted me that night. I really am sorry. I didn't reply. Some apologies arrive too late. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. And some people only realize what they had when they see you moving on without them. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because just when I finally felt free, Nathan's name appeared somewhere I never expected. And this time, he wasn't calling to apologize. He was about to step directly back into my life. Nathan's name didn't appear on my phone. That would have been too obvious. Too direct. Too easy to ignore. Instead, it showed up in my inbox, wrapped in professionalism, disguised as coincidence. The subject line read, Upcoming industry collaboration. Quick sync? I stared at it for a long moment, my coffee cooling beside my laptop. The email was from a senior producer at Meridian Collective, one of the largest event strategy firms in the region. A firm I'd quietly admired for years. A firm I'd recently been shortlisted to consult for on a high-profile systems overhaul. And apparently a firm Nathan had just joined. His name sat casually in the CC line, like an afterthought. Like a detail I was supposed to overlook. My chest didn't tighten the way it used to. What I felt instead was something colder, sharper. Awareness. I didn't respond right away. I read the email 3 times. Neutral language. Collaborative tone. No hint of personal history. Just business. Just timing. Still, my fingers hesitated over the keyboard. This wasn't him reaching out. This was him positioning himself somewhere I couldn't ignore him. Rachel noticed the shift in me before I said anything. We were at lunch, a small Italian place near her office. She was halfway through a story about a client who'd tried to rebrand his divorce like a product launch when she stopped mid-sentence. You're quiet, she said. I might be working with Nathan again, I replied. She didn't react immediately, just set her fork down carefully. Is that a question? She asked. Or a warning? A complication, I said. Rachel leaned back, studying me. Do you want to? That was the question that mattered. I thought about it. About the version of me who would have avoided this at all costs. Who would have declined politely, cited bandwidth, preserved peace. I don't want to run, I said finally. And I don't want him thinking he still has gravity. Rachel nodded slowly. Then don't give it to him. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Video call. 10 people. Cameras on. Professional. Contained. I logged in 2 minutes early. Faces popped onto the screen one by one. Producers. Strategists. A legal rep, the senior producer who'd emailed me, smiled when she saw my name. Elena, great to finally meet you, she said. We've heard nothing but strong things. Happy to be here, I replied. And then his camera turned on. Nathan looked polished. Same tailored blazer. Same carefully casual haircut. Same expression he used in rooms where he needed to impress without seeming like he was trying. Our eyes met for half a second. He froze. Just for a beat. Then he smiled. Elena, he said warmly. Didn't realize you'd be on this. Neither did I replied evenly. If he was expecting discomfort, he didn't get it. If he was expecting warmth, he didn't get that either. The meeting moved on. We talked timelines, deliverables, system constraints. I spoke when I needed to, listened when I didn't, took notes. Nathan tried subtly to assert familiarity. He referenced past collaborations. Used phrases like, as we've seen before, and you know how this goes. I corrected him once. Actually, I said calmly, that approach didn't scale last time. We'll need a different architecture here. The room went quiet. Not awkward. Attentive. The senior producer nodded. Good catch. Let's flag that. Nathan didn't look at me again for the rest of the call. Afterward, I closed my laptop and sat still for a moment. I didn't feel shaken. I felt recalibrated. The next move came faster than I expected. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Didn't expect to see you on that call. I stared at the screen. Didn't reply. Another message came through. You handled yourself well. Still nothing. Then, can we talk? Just to clear the air. I exhaled slowly. There it was. The door he thought was still unlocked. I typed 3 words. There is no air. Then I muted the thread. That should have been the end of it. But Nathan had always struggled with endings he didn't control. A week later, Megan called me. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, she said carefully, but you should know what he's saying. My stomach tightened slightly. Saying what? That you blindsided him. That you're being vindictive. I laughed softly. By existing? He's framing it like you're trying to undermine him professionally, she continued. That the timing is suspicious. Is it working? I asked. There was a pause. No, Megan said. But it's loud. That was Nathan's pattern. If he couldn't control the narrative quietly, he made noise. The next escalation didn't come from him directly. It came from HR. A neutral email, carefully worded. A routine inquiry regarding interpersonal history that might impact collaboration. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Rachel. She called immediately. He's pushing, she said. Which means he's scared. I didn't do anything, I replied. Exactly, she said. And that's what he can't stand. I responded to HR with facts only. Dates. Context. No emotion. We previously dated. The relationship ended over a year ago. There is no ongoing personal contact. I am fully capable of maintaining professional boundaries. I thought that would satisfy them. It didn't. Because Nathan wasn't aiming for resolution. He was aiming for doubt. 2 days later, a colleague pulled me aside after a meeting. Hey, she said hesitantly. I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? I'm fine, I replied. She nodded, but her eyes searched my face. I heard there was history, she said. With Nathan. I just wanted you to know if you need support. I thanked her, but inside, something hardened. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about him reclaiming space. That night, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Not to retaliate. To prepare. Screenshots. Emails. Timelines. Witnesses. I didn't feel angry as I worked. I felt precise. Because when someone tries to rewrite you into a problem, the only way to win is to become undeniable. By the end of the week, I had a file. Clean. Factual. Impeccable. I sent one email. To Meridian's legal counsel. Subject line. Clarification and documentation for record. I attached everything. Then I closed my laptop. The response didn't come immediately. But when it did, it changed everything. Because Nathan hadn't just overplayed his hand. He'd exposed a pattern. And this time, it wasn't just my word against his. It was evidence. And consequences. The reply from Meridian's legal team arrived at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen counter with my laptop open, untouched oatmeal slowly congealing in its bowl. I hadn't slept much. Not because I was anxious, but because some part of me had already accepted that this situation was no longer about Nathan. It was about power. The email was short, carefully neutral, almost polite. They thanked me for my transparency, acknowledged receipt of the documentation, assured me that no formal complaint had been filed against me and that the inquiry had been initiated due to internal inconsistencies raised by another party. Another party. Not Nathan. Not a colleague. Just another party. But we both knew who that was. They ended with a sentence that landed heavier than the rest. At this time, we are reviewing whether continued joint collaboration is appropriate. Appropriate. That word sat in my chest like unfinished business. I forwarded the email to Rachel. She called immediately. He's trying to force them to choose, she said. I'm not competing, I replied. I'm just standing here. Which is why this is killing him, she said. Men like Nathan don't know what to do with women who don't plead. That afternoon, Megan called again. This time, she didn't soften her voice. He's spiraling, she said. I leaned back against my couch. How so? He thinks you're trying to ruin him, she said flatly. He's convinced you're orchestrating this. I closed my eyes. I didn't even say his name, I replied. That's the problem, Megan said. You're not reacting the way he expects. He needs you to be emotional, vindictive, messy, something he can point to. Is he saying this to you? I asked. Yes, she said. And to anyone who'll listen. There was a pause. Do you want me to shut him down? She asked. I thought about that. About Megan, standing between us like a referee in a game she never asked to officiate. About how many times she'd probably done this before. Cleaned up emotional wreckage her brother left behind. No, I said finally. Let him talk. That was the mistake he kept making. Talking. 3 days later, Meridian scheduled individual follow-up interviews. Mine was first. I logged in, greeted by two faces, legal counsel and HR. They asked about timelines. I gave them dates. They asked about communication. I showed them receipts. They asked about intent. I told them the truth. I didn't seek him out, I said calmly. I didn't reference our history. I didn't engage outside of work. My only goal was to do my job. They nodded, took notes. Then one of them asked, Did Mr. Caldwell ever imply that your personal history would affect your professional standing? I paused, because this was the first question that cut close. Yes, I said. Indirectly. I explained the texts, the attempts to clear the air, the narrative shift when I didn't respond. How did that make you feel? HR asked. I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't about feelings. It made me cautious, I said. And it made me document. That answer changed the tone of the room. They didn't interview Nathan until 2 days later. I didn't know what he said, but I knew how it ended. Because the following Monday, I got another email. This one longer. More formal. They thanked me again for my cooperation. Noted that after review, Meridian had determined there was no professional misconduct on my part. In fact, they appreciated my measured and proactive handling of a potentially sensitive overlap. Then came the part that made my breath catch. Given the circumstances, we have decided to restructure the project leadership to avoid any appearance of conflict. Effective immediately, Mr. Caldwell will be reassigned. Reassigned. Not fired. Not punished. But removed. I stared at the screen. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Rachel came over that night with takeout and a bottle of wine. We didn't toast. We didn't celebrate. We sat on my floor and ate noodles out of cartons like two people decompressing after a storm. He's going to blame you, she said. I know, I replied. And he's going to escalate, she added. I know that too. Because people like Nathan don't accept quiet losses. They turn them into personal crusades. The escalation came in the form of Claire. I hadn't heard her name in weeks. Not since Megan mentioned their failed reunion. Not since the whispers faded and life resumed its rhythm. Then one Friday evening, I ran into her at a fundraising gala. Of all places. She was standing near the bar, dressed in something sculpted and sharp, holding a champagne flute like it was an accessory instead of a drink. Our eyes met. She didn't look away. She walked toward me. Elena, she said, smiling tightly. Can we talk? I studied her face. She looked different. Less polished. More brittle. Sure, I said. We stepped aside, the hum of conversation filling the space between us. I heard about Meridian, she said. Did you? I replied. She nodded. Nathan's not doing well. I almost laughed. I'm not his keeper, I said. I know, she said quickly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. I waited. She didn't elaborate. For what exactly? I asked. For interfering, she said. For pulling him back into things. For making you feel small. There it was. Not basic. Small. You didn't make me feel small, I said quietly. I chose someone who did. She flinched. I was jealous, she admitted. You were stable. Grounded. He listened to you. Until he didn't, I replied. She nodded, eyes glossy. He's angry, she said. At you. At me. At everyone. That's his pattern, I said. She looked at me then really looked. I thought you'd hate me, she said. I don't. I replied honestly. I just don't trust you. She swallowed. That's fair, she said. We stood there for a moment longer. Then she said something that told me everything I needed to know. He keeps saying you planned this, she said. That you played the long game. I smiled. Did it ever occur to him? I asked. That I just stopped playing? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. Elena, Nathan's voice said, strained and sharp. You think you won. You think this makes you better. But you didn't build this. You just benefited from it. Remember that. I listened once. Then deleted it. Because the truth was simple. I hadn't destroyed him. I had stepped out of his shadow. And for someone like Nathan, that was unforgivable. But the story wasn't over yet. Because when people lose control in public, they often try to reclaim it in private. And Nathan still had one move left. One that would force me to confront not just who he was, but who I had become. Nathan's last move didn't come as a message. It came as a rumor. I didn't hear it from him. I didn't even hear it from Meridian. I heard it from a woman I barely knew, someone I'd spoken to twice at a conference panel months earlier. She messaged me on LinkedIn, of all places. Her tone was careful, hesitant. Hey Elena, this might be awkward, and please tell me if I'm overstepping, but I thought you should know something that's circulating. My stomach didn't drop. It steadied. Because when damage is coming, you feel it before it lands. She told me that Nathan had been telling people, quietly, selectively, that our relationship ended because I was unstable under pressure. That I'd become emotionally reactive toward the end. That working with me now required extra sensitivity. No accusations. No events. Just a character assassination soft enough to sound like concern. I stared at the message, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. Unstable. That was the word this time. Not basic. Not small. Unstable. The evolution of the insult didn't escape me. I thanked her for telling me and closed the app. Then I sat very still. This wasn't about Meridian anymore. This was about my reputation. And that was something I would not let him touch. Rachel came over within an hour. She didn't ask questions when she saw my face. Just poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "He's testing your silence," she said after I told her. "I know," I replied. "He wants a reaction." "Do you want one?" she asked. I thought about that. About how far I'd come by not engaging, by refusing to mirror his chaos, by letting facts speak louder than feelings. And then I thought about every woman who'd been quietly reframed as difficult because she stopped being convenient. "Yes," I said finally, "but not the kind he expects." The next morning, I requested a formal meeting. Not with Meridian, with my own firm's leadership. I didn't frame it as a complaint. I framed it as disclosure. I explained that a former partner, now in an adjacent professional circle, appeared to be mischaracterizing our past. I clarified that there had never been a performance issue, never a behavioral concern, never a warning or complaint. I provided documentation, not defensively, preemptively. My director listened carefully. Then she said something that shifted the ground beneath me. "Elena," she said, "we trust you. And we already know this pattern." I blinked. "You do?" She nodded. "You're not the first woman to quietly flag him." That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just my story. It never had been. Over the next 2 weeks, small things happened. Nothing dramatic. Nothing headline-worthy. But enough to form a picture. A former colleague declined to recommend Nathan for a pitch. A senior producer stopped looping him into high-visibility projects. A woman I'd never met emailed me to say, "Thank you for speaking up." I thought it was just me. Nathan didn't disappear, but he shrank. And people like him don't know how to live small. The last contact came late one night. A single email. No subject line. Just text. "You really didn't have to do all this." I would have let it go. I read it twice. Then I replied, "You didn't lose because I acted. You lost because you kept talking." I didn't hear from him again. Not directly. But a week later, Megan called. "He's moving," she said quietly. "New city. New firm. Clean slate." "Good," I replied. "He says you ruined his life," she added. I smiled softly, not out of cruelty, but clarity. "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting it." There was a long pause. "I'm proud of you," Megan said. After we hung up, I stood by my window, watching the city breathe in the dark. I thought about the word that started all of this. Basic. How small it once made me feel. How deeply it lodged itself into my sense of worth. And how powerless it sounded now. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need revenge. I needed boundaries. And once I drew them, everything else fell into place. But some stories don't end with silence. Some end with distance. And as Nathan disappeared into a new skyline, carrying the same patterns he'd never confronted, I knew one thing for certain. Wherever he went next, the truth would eventually follow. And it always arrives uninvited. The city didn't notice when Nathan left. No farewell posts. No dramatic announcement. No final round of apologies dressed up as growth. People like him rarely exit loudly when they know the doors behind them are already closing. I found out he was gone the same way I'd learned so many other things about him. Indirectly, through the absence he left behind. His name stopped appearing in forwarded emails. His calendar slots disappeared from shared schedules. His opinions, once so confidently offered, quietly evaporated. At first, I thought that would be the end of it. But endings don't always feel like relief right away. Sometimes they feel like space. And space is uncomfortable when you've spent too long shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. The weeks after Nathan left were strange. Peaceful, but unfamiliar. I didn't have to brace myself before meetings anymore. I didn't reread messages looking for subtext. I didn't rehearse calm responses in case someone tried to provoke me. And without that constant vigilance, something unexpected surfaced. Grief. Not for him. For myself. For the version of me that laughed when she was insulted. For the nights I replayed conversations, wondering how to be less. For the way I mistook emotional restraint for maturity when it was really just survival. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, laptop closed, lights dim, and let myself finally feel it. Not anger, sadness. Because humiliation doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers and convinces you it's your fault. Rachel noticed the shift before I said anything. "You're quieter," she said over dinner one night. "I think I finally stopped running," I replied. She smiled gently. "That tends to catch up with people." Around that time, Meridian reached out again. Not to reopen old wounds, but to offer something new. A long-term consulting role. More autonomy. More visibility. No mention of Nathan. No explanation needed. I accepted. Not because it felt like a win, but because it felt earned. A few months later, I ran into Claire one last time. It was unplanned. Unremarkable. A grocery store. Late evening. Frozen food aisle. She looked startled when she saw me, then tired. Older in a way makeup couldn't hide. "Elena," she said softly. "Claire," I replied. We stood there for a moment, the hum of freezers filling the silence. "He left," she said, like a confession. "I know," I replied. She nodded. "I thought he'd change." "I think he thought that too," I said. She hesitated. "I'm in therapy now. I hope it helps," I said honestly. There was no bitterness left in me, just distance. Before she walked away, she said something that stayed with me. "He always needed someone to feel smaller than him," she said. I don't think I realized how much I helped him do that. I watched her go, and for the first time, I didn't feel like part of a triangle that never made sense. I felt outside it. Complete. The final ripple came almost a year later. An email from a junior analyst I'd mentored briefly. She thanked me for recommending her for a role. Then she added a line at the end. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but watching how you handled that situation last year made it easier for me to speak up in my own life." I read that sentence 3 times. And that's when it hit me. This story was never about revenge. Revenge implies obsession. It implies needing the other person to suffer. What happened instead was quieter and more powerful. I reclaimed myself. I stopped explaining. Stopped defending. Stopped contorting my worth to fit someone else's ambition. Nathan didn't lose because I exposed him. He lost because I stepped out of the role he needed me to play. And without an audience, his performance meant nothing. If someone has to make you feel small to feel important, they are not powerful, they are afraid. Silence is not weakness. Boundaries are not cruelty. And walking away without chaos is sometimes the strongest response you'll ever make. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to stop protecting the people who never protected you. Because the moment you do, they reveal themselves. And the world finally sees what you already survived.